If you need an agentless data protection solution for Citrix Hypervisor, then Storware Backup and Recovery is one of the solutions that you may consider. In this short video, I'm going to give you an overview of its features. Let's start by logging into the console. So admin and my password. And the very first step is obviously to see the dashboard. So in the dashboard, notice that there is a configuration wizard at the top. We're going to get back to this in a moment. But in general, dashboard is going to report you all of the necessary information such as success rate, protection statistics, some activity for backup and restores for past 14 days, transfer rates, and many more. So you can have multiple data movers. We call them nodes. So on the right here, you notice that I have one node already installed, but you can expand and you can have more of them, and some backup destination statistics. Now, if you would like to add Citrix Hypervisor, then in the virtual environment sections, in the infrastructure tab, notice that there is Hypervisor sub in here, and that's the place where you add a standalone hypervisor. So if you have a cluster of a pool of hypervisors, then you will have to add all of them, especially the one that is currently master host. So always remember to do that. So in general, host, username and password, that's the only thing that you need to specify, but remember to choose between strategies. We recommend the separate disks plus change block tracking. Change block tracking may require some licensing, appropriate license on the Citrix part, but this one offers the widest range of the feature set. That includes file level restore capability, for instance. The difference between these two is that the first one exports data using native format, so XV image, plus optionally deltas for each drive, and the second one exports separate disks already in the raw format, so that gives you the flexibility in terms also for the iSCSI sharing drives over iSCSI capability. So that's usually the one that I recommend. Now, once you have added your hypervisor, you may invoke the synchronization process. So you can invoke that on any of these hypervisors, regardless of the specific connection to the cluster, to the hypervisor pool. But in general, these are going to connect behind the scenes to the master host and collect all of the necessary information. Everything is a task, so notice that I have inventory synchronization flow already completed, and this should collect information about the pools. So I may have one pool in such scenario. I can have multiple storage repositories, networks, so all of this is gathered, but the most important part obviously is the virtual machine. So the virtual machines section, so the instances section, allows me to invoke backups. In order to do that, the very first step actually is to create a backup SLA. So backup SLA, I have one here already prepared, describes several information. So it needs to provide a few things. Virtual environments, that's the place where you manually may assign virtual machines. If you don't want to do that manually, you may want to use the auto-assignment feature, and based on the naming convention of your virtual machines, or maybe you have tags already used in your Citrix environment, you can create include and exclude rules, and the virtual machine may be automatically assigned only, or assigned and removed if it no longer matches your criteria. Then rules. You can have multiple rules, but each rule describes basically where the data needs to be stored, how long the backups should be kept there, and also allows you to specify schedules. So for the Citrix, I have 2 schedules already assigned. Remember, if you would like to use incremental backups, you need to have at least one incremental schedule in the policy. Otherwise, snapshots are going to be automatically removed after each backup. So in order to keep the last one for future incremental backups, you need to have this schedule be available in here. Optionally, you may enable secondary backup destination, so the backups are going to be stored in 2 places instead of 1, so that's this switch in here. And the requirement for that is to have the synthetic backup provider as the primary backup destination. Once you have schedules and policies, then you need to assign it in your instances view. So I have one of the instances already with the assigned SLA. So either assign it instance to the policy from the policy view, or you can also do that from this list and click assign policy. Let's invoke maybe backup in this case. So I have incremental available for this one, so I can proceed, or obviously schedule it for, let's say, to be proceeded within a few hours. And this creates again the workflow. So we would like to export data first, and that's usually the first task. Then once the export succeeds, we can store the data in one of the supported backup providers. So in the meantime, let's go there. And in the backup destination section, you need to have at least one backup destination in order for your policy to have something to refer to. But notice that in general, you may want to use more than one backup destination, either as a secondary or just to have different backups stored in different places. For file system, synthetic is the one that allows us quicker restores and for a very incremental approach. And we also support, let's say, some file systems like the ISO layer. Let's say ISO layer is the option to expose NFS shares dynamically per virtual machine and unmount them automatically after the backup is stored. So it will minimize the effects of potential ransomware attacking your nodes, for instance. We also support object storage. So for the object storage, there is S3 or S3 compatible, Google Cloud Storage, Microsoft Azure or OpenStack Swift available. And if you have legacy or enterprise grade backup providers, then we usually is this menu, and we have Dell EMC, Avamar, Networker, IBM, Veritas or Microfocus available. All of which obviously have may have different requirements. Now my backup has completed. Notice that apart from store, there are also additional steps, such as cleanup steps. And once it completes, I should have it in my details. So now, if I go to my virtual machines, in the details, notice that apart from regular information at the top, if you scroll down, you have some backup restore statistics. That also includes not only backup size, but backup time as well. It may be important for you to detect if the backup, let's say, is taking longer because of the export or because of the store phase. The same for the restores if they have been done. Also transfer rate statistics, so that also may show you which phase is getting slower. At the bottom you have more details about the backups that are available for restore, complete backup history if something fails. That includes also in which locations your backups are stored, restore history, snapshots. Notice that I have one snapshot available and left on the hypervisor for future incrementals. And disks. Let's say this one is important because this allows me to exclude drives from the backup. For the you also may want to preview the schedules, and in the settings tab there are a few things to note. First of all, option to use quiet snapshots, that is supported by Citrix Hypervisor. Optionally override the backup strategy, and a pre-post snapshot command, remote command execution, allows you to invoke custom command just before snapshot takes place and just after it has been done. That's over SSH or WinRM, so it should work with most of your guest operating systems, and it is, let's say, last resort option if you have more complex scenario that you have database that maybe it requires specifically some custom commands to be executed for consistency purposes. Remember that it is an agentless backup, so there is no agent inside the virtual machine. And by default, if you don't enable quiet or snapshots feature, it is going to be crash consistent. Now let's invoke restore. Restore is going to be to hypervisor. Usually is automatically selected the original one, so I have restore to, let's modify its name, and I can have option to exclude some drives or change the storage repository for these drives, networking settings, advanced, and then in summary I'm going to have all of the information that is for this particular restore job that has been selected, and I click restore. So restore job is also going to be two-step process. First we need to fetch data from the external source, let's say it's going to be S3 or something, and then we need to transfer data back to the hypervisor once it is merged, because remember that non-synthetic backup providers that we have, they require chains of the backups to be merged before we import data back to the hypervisor. So in the task console, my restore notice that the restore task has already been completed. That's because it's synthetic backup provider, so everything is already in the form that we need for the import, and now import proceeds, so it transfers back the data to the hypervisor. Now in the meantime, notice that I also have snapshot history tab. That's especially important for the other than backup SLA policy that we support, and it's called snapshot SLA. So we can periodically create snapshots and leave them on the hypervisor without exporting the data. We recommend to keep that short, so in the retention settings, in the rule here, we recommend to keep the version low, let's say like one version, and kept for instance for 1 day. So that would be an extra form of an extra data protection that wouldn't require data to be exported over and over again from your hypervisor. Not only the backups, but also just regular snapshots, and these snapshots can be reverted from our console here or directly from the Citrix XenServer. Another thing is that I have manually invoked the restore process for this particular VM. It's still going to be imported, but notice that I can also create something called recovery plan. So Citrix RP1, let's say, and once I have created such recovery plan, I can specify rules. Each rule needs to be keep the virtual machines of the same type. So in the name I'll have RP1, let's say, virtual environment. Now I can specify that I would like to protect specific virtual machine. Like this one, for instance. And I can optionally assign schedules. I may just want also to invoke that when I have a real disaster, but optionally I can use it for testing purposes. And that's the same reason why you have two options in here. You can restore backups, try to restore backups, even if they are in the failed state, just for reporting purposes. But usually you would like to restore last successful. Then you specify the same parameters that you have for regular restore, and optionally you may want to use either generated name, generated with snapshot, remove virtual machines, especially if you have periodic job with the same name, give them some prefix and so on. So that is actually a plan for multiple virtual machines that you would restore with a single click or just by the specific schedule. Now my restore has already completed, so inside my XenServer, notice that I have my Linux Alpine Restore 2 VM already available to be used. Now one more thing, file level restore. So in the instances view, there is additional button here. Let's go to my Citrix VM, and this allows me to mount such backup. So let's invoke already automatic mount, and in the meantime let's have a short overview what is available in here. File level restore requires us to mount, so we also need to merge, like in this case, all of the chains of the backups if it's not a synthetic backup provider, and expose it to the administrator so he's able to browse its contents. It can be either automatically or manually, and the difference is that automatic mount allows us to mount the nested file systems like home directory, for instance. So instead of walking through different set of directories, you will have a feeling that it is a single root file system, exactly like it is in the FS tab. Optionally, so you can exclude obviously some file systems, and we would restore only the disk that is required for recovery of this particular partition. The only limitation is that it has to be a standalone partition, not an LVM volume. Then we have the shared drives over iSCSI, which is useful for Windows guests. Remember that file level restore may not preserve the Windows permissions, and using the iSCSI share, we will have a complete volume exposed over iSCSI, and it can be mounted directly on the Windows guests. So everything that includes the partition layout could be accessed by the external, let's say, guest, like Windows guest in this case, but not only. Mount is also a two-step process, as I mentioned, so restore was instant, but mount may take a while. It is going to have an additional artifact here on this list, so I have already initiated mount previously, and if you go to the details of such mounted backup, here are file systems. I have automatic mount, so I'm going to have a single root file system. I can click browse, and I can download data directly from here. So in my boot directory, I may have some config file that I would like to download directly via browser. For larger data, you may also consider just going directly to the node and copying it over the SSH. But there is an additional option called remote upload, where you specify host, destination path, some credentials that includes the passwords, keys, etc., and transfer data directly from this node to the external operating system into the specific directory. For larger environments, we may want to add additional nodes, so a single node could cover several hypervisors, but at some point you may want to have additional nodes available so that this transfer and workload is in general somehow distributed to cover larger environments. That can be obviously done, and multiple nodes are going to be assigned based on your node configurations. And this concludes my demo. I really encourage you to download and try Storware Backup and Recovery for Citrix Hypervisor environments, and thank you for watching.